It didn't take long at today's shoot-around to see who was missing, and soon it was confirmed that the club had run out of patience with import Johnny McLenton.
He's a very good guy and tried very hard, but it was very difficult to come in halfway through a season and fit into our system.
Points tell the tale too, or rather lack of them. Flown in 3 weeks ago to replace Odell Bradley, McLenton hit 7 in his first game, but followed that with just 4 points in 2 games last weekend. With no obvious replacement, Hurley will simply run with the guys he's got. The best of that bunch of late has been the import success story of Mike Helms, who's now sporting a new look hairdo with the signature afro gone.
It started heating up out here, man, and I couldn't take it anymore. I had to do something about it because it's starting to get real hot up under there.
It sounds much like his game, which has earned him a spot in the World All-Star team to play the Australian selection later this month in Sydney.
I feel I'm one of the top players in the league, and I think that's just a sign of, recognition.
Aaron Trahair, meanwhile, trained lightly with the team this morning despite a back problem. A decision, though, on his availability won't be confirmed until tonight's warm-up. Hand-delivering a document of appeal on Tuesday, Maria Lynch is now waiting to hear if she'll get another chance to defend her position. But there's some conjecture tonight if the independent tribunal that oversees the appeal process has authority on staffing matters at Netball New South Wales. Just as it's difficult to get clarity on the reasons behind her termination last week, the timeframe to any appeal is also unclear. Incumbent captain Jane Altschwager has waited long enough to get the news she's been chasing, with the specialist clearing her to begin running once again.
I'll start with some slow jogging, sort of 50% of sprint, and then build it up probably over the month to start with, and then really get into it come mid-January.
The Achilles tear, which ended her season with the semi-finals beckoning, has also cost her any chance of Commonwealth Games selection, and thoughts of both are driving her recovery.
The last 2 years I've had some fairly major injuries, and for one who never had injuries before, I think I've had my fair share now.
And it'll be a tough start to the season next year as well, with the Jaggers drawn to play both Perth and Adelaide away before their first home game in round 3. Hunter's season will also include a match in Townsville against Queensland. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
It's the ideal way to bring in the new year, relaxing by the shore of Lake Macquarie or even on the water. And the big draw card has always been the fireworks. But in 3 weeks' time, unfortunately, it'll be a scene missing from the sky above Lake Macquarie, with Warners Bay Chamber of Commerce unable to raise the $25,000 to stage the display and cover insurance costs.
Virtually it's a cost factor. The Chamber's been putting the event on for 6 years now, and it's just been rising from 2,000 in the first year right through to 25 last year.
The Chamber says it's missed the corporate sponsorship boat, but they are after financial support for next year.
Every year I come down here and it's a great spectacular, but yeah, it is a big shame that we're missing out.
Have a boat in the lake and bring the boat in and watch the fireworks. We really love doing that, so it'd be a big shame.
But Auld Lang Syne will still be sung, with the traditional New Year's Eve concert to still go ahead.
For Peter Blackmore, Christmas just isn't the same without tinsel, stars and angels adorning Maitland's shopping precinct.
I am absolutely cranky about it because, this is Christmas, and let's start to set an example.
And he's not alone.
I think it's a disgrace.
It's just not right. It's supposed to be Christmas. Everybody's supposed to enjoy the centre, and it just seems dull.
Mayor Blackmore says a decision to cut costs by not putting up decorations in the CBD was made by a council employee, not the elected council, and it's one he's pushing to have overturned. While there's nothing hanging from above, on the ground, shop owners are adding cheer with their own festive designs. It's hoped this spirit will carry across to New Year's Eve, when the riverbank of Maitland will come alive with massive celebrations. Colleen West, NBN News. These 3 women came to Australia to escape atrocities in their homeland of Africa, but claim they've faced plenty of heartache since stepping onto our soil. Yeye Gabide, her sister Princess and friend Carolyn Nkango faced not only culture shock and language barriers, but the women say they were refused basic treatment from the Australian Centre of Languages, a Sydney firm that helps find accommodation, provides furniture and basically gets them on their feet.
No food, no friend, no communication, nothing. So I used to cry in a house.
The women say that when they arrived in the Hunter, they were dropped at homes without being shown how to use electrical items they'd never seen before. Yeye says she was told by ACL that she couldn't have a food voucher after refusing to sign a 12-month lease for a rental property. Carolyn says she did sign the lease but didn't understand what she was doing at the time.
I signed for a house for 12 months. So now I don't know how to get out from this.
Local church and community groups have now stepped in, and the matter has also been raised in federal parliament.
I have a close to where I'm happy. Yes, I'm happy now.
The Department of Immigration, Multicultural and Indigenous Affairs today confirmed it's reviewing the matter. It also says ACL has increased its number of workers in the Newcastle area to 5 and is now looking to recruit volunteers to assist. Colleen West, NBN News.
They are savage turns in nature which, among other things, cripple our power supply.
70% of our outages are related to storms or other weather events, so we've taken the opportunity this summer to change our system a little bit.
The importance of battery-operated torches and radios were brought to a head on Wednesday night when a community near Foster was plunged into darkness. How to be prepared for blackouts features in a new summer safety guide. Checkpoints of what to do during and after storms also appear, with an emphasis on fallen power lines.
And we treat every wire that is down as alive until it's proven otherwise. So the best thing to do is to keep clear. Ring Energy Australia on 131388.
And establishing that contact is paramount. That is, of course, not by landline telephone during a storm. Further tips can be viewed online at Energy Australia's website. Adam McKilrick, NBN News.
The dead oysters on each one of these trays would have been worth around $2,000 if allowed to reach their potential. They weren't killed by the contaminated water, but because all the staff needed to tend them have been sacked. It's been 5 months since harvesting was banned in the top half of the creek, and businesses like Mark Shepherd's are on the verge of collapse.
Quite devastated, me and the family. It's been family business for over 80 years, 4 generations, and to come unstuck through pollution like this is devastating.
Legal action against the council and the state government for allowing the septic tanks in a high water table area now seems the only option.
The only way we'll get compensation is through the courts. We have to sue them.
We're tenants of the state. We have leases that we lease, so the state certainly has responsibility there. They should have been making sure that council with their audits of septic tanks are up to speed.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Most of them are pretty good. We don't find many kids coming up here sunburnt. And we've noticed a huge change in sort of 10 or 15 years.
Despite a back injury, Aaron Torres suited up and Geordie Cullen liked having him out there. But Cairns was soon on target from long range. And they needed to be, with Jason Everstein hunting them in close. Mike Helms is a marked man these days, but Cairns couldn't catch him every time. Nor Cullen, who was making the most of his additional game time with import Johnny McGlanton released by the club. Torres was feeding, while Martin Catalini was blowing, proving the point that arguing the call doesn't get you anywhere, but in more trouble. If Taipan's coach Alan Black was exactly that at half-time, his mood wouldn't have changed much after the break, as the flair of Torres had the home crowd cheering. Helms adding to the visitors' misery, as running battles continued across the court. Anthony Stewart lost on all fronts. Nursing a sore jaw, he was fouled off, and it was probably a good thing the chair couldn't fight back. The Pirates winning the main bout by 18, with Cullen's haul of 25 his best of the season.
Built in the early 1970s, this shed was the base for a volunteer firefighting unit started in the 60s by a group of local dairy farmers. The Saltash Williamtown RFS has since moved down the road to new headquarters for 25 volunteers.
We've got 3 bays, whereas the old station we had to move the trucks around to get in and out, and we've got a training room and a kitchen and toilets.
For all the wrong reasons, 1994 is a year the unit won't forget, a region notorious for bushfire.
Yeah, certainly it's a very, very busy little station here. Has a very large urban-rural interface area. So we do get a lot of bushfires that impact on the back of properties.
A facility funded by Port Stephens Council, it represents a marriage of sorts, but not everyone is happy.
There was some resident opposition early in the piece, but I think when they look around, see what we've developed here and they still have their own park, I think that will go away.
The RFS, however, is on better terms with its colleagues on the coast after a new partnership. The Lower Hunter RFS After Hours Radio will be operated by the Port Stephens Royal Volunteer Coastal Patrol, a unique arrangement to better use resources and share a 24-hour responsibility. Adam McIlrick, NBN News.
The Lord Mayor and councillors paid a few visits to the mall markets after they opened 4 months ago, but like the rest of Newcastle, they obviously didn't spend enough. The private company that spent over $1 million installing the shade structures and stalls and which leases the space from council is believed to have debts totalling $600,000. The market's director, who lives in New Zealand, has placed the schmozzle in the hands of administrators Ferrier Hodgson. They wouldn't speak on camera today, but the Lord Mayor would.
We will be a creditor along with other parties, and where that'll finish up I don't know. I'd anticipate that they can trade out of this.
So when you do the maths, ratepayers invested $450,000 in the project, which managed to return just $20,000 in lease payments before it folded. And then there's the weekend parking meter issue that council says had no effect at all.
And I still believe that we took the right course of action there in making sure the spots were available.
The future of the markets will be decided at a meeting of creditors on Monday. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
The expansion of Charlestown Square has been a contentious issue for months, but councillors showed they could agree on something when they unanimously voted to accept the compensation package last night.
Councillors did raise some issues of concern, but when it came down to the final vote, there was no dissent, so that's an excellent outcome.
The decision paves the way for GPT to forge ahead with plans for the $300 million redevelopment. They can now begin detailed design work and commence the processes necessary to relocate the neighbouring bowling club. As part of the compensation package, Lake Macquarie City Council will buy out 8 properties on Carl Close, turning them into a park to replace Ferris Oval. Most of the residents in the quiet street are pensioners, including 93-year-old Enid Pike, who lives in a house her father built in 1938. Back then, there were only 3 shops here in Charlestown, and while Enid says she can't stop progress, she is concerned about what it will mean for the value of her property. Council has emphasised it won't be forcing anyone to sell. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
Their core responsibility may be roads, rubbish and rates, but in reality a councillor's job also ranges from development approvals to social responsibilities. Even though most complete an induction course after their election, Local Government Minister Kerry Hickey is now considering professional development courses for them on subjects like policy making and strategic vision. While not against further education, Hunter Council's Chairman Peter Blackmore believes councillors across the region do understand their job.
Times have changed. It is not back in 1993 now, it's 2005, and all councillors have a greater understanding of the Local Government Act of 1993 than what they did of the previous Act of 1919.
But first-term Newcastle councillor Helen O'Neill reckons she's got enough council business on her plate and professional development isn't necessary.
I think it's a waste of taxpayers' money. Who's going to put the course together? How much is this going to cost? You know, the ratepayers are always hit.
Peter Blackmore agrees ratepayers shouldn't be slugged and any education would be best handled by the regional organisation of councils.
Hunter councils, we have 12 councils. We also have a training school set up in that Hunter councils that we should be looking at running a course which would be acceptable to the Minister here in the Hunter.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
Cats have this clever knack of convincing us they're refined and demure, but in reality most of them turn into lethal stalkers when the sun goes down. The targets, native birds and wildlife.
They're nocturnal hunters, and most of our mammals, our small mammals, are nocturnal, and therefore there's a great clash there, and the fact is that the cats come out on top.
Complaints about killer cats prompted a Lake Macquarie City councillor to suggest implementing a feline curfew, forcing all kitties indoors after dusk. But exploration of the idea exposed a myriad of associated problems.
There is no legislation under the Companion Animals Act that would allow council to do that. And my personal view is, even if there was and we implemented such regulations, it would be almost impossible for us to implement satisfactorily.
Instead, the council is urging cat owners to take the matter into their own hands by acting responsibly.
Keep their cats under control, certainly keep them in at night.
Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
They're the nasty little surprises that pop up in places you'd least expect them, and they're on a mission for a warm, damp location near you. There's been an explosion in American cockroach numbers in Queensland and New South Wales, the unwelcome intruders taking up residence in just about every nook and cranny they can find. The insects thrive on humid conditions and feed on sewage, garbage and food, beginning what can be a very nasty cycle of events.
Their faeces and bits of their body can get into people's food, and that can affect people.
Cockroaches can carry salmonella for up to 7 weeks, and there have also been reported links between cockroach allergens and asthma. And while that may sound nasty, there's plenty that can be done to keep them at bay, including pest extermination.
Leave their back or front light off, the external lights, or change the globes to a yellow globe that doesn't attract insects.
Keeping curtains closed, installing a good quality weather strip on the bottom of doors and reducing the amount of cardboard boxes and paper can also help. And it's a good idea to keep food in an airtight container to ensure you don't get a mouthful of unwanted protein. Colleen West, NBN News.
The sunshine of Newcastle is a far cry from the freezing fields of northern England and that forgettable Tri-Nations final loss to New Zealand. Danny Medeiros hadn't even made it back home and the fallout was felt, with Wayne Bennett stepping down as coach. Ricky Stewart was quickly named his replacement, while Graham Murray is the new Blues mentor.
I don't think it's too quick. You need someone to step in there, and I haven't had anything to do with Graham Murray, but all reports and his results up there at the Cowboys, he's going to do a great job in Origin as well.
The Knights rake knows all about his club coach Michael Hagan's ability, but he's yet to get a full read on just what's happening with his future at Newcastle. With club officials touting performance as the gauge on that decision, Medeiros believes it's hard to point the finger at just one.
A lot of factors go into having a poor season, and as a poor old coach, I feel sorry for, it's not the coach's fault. They can only do their bit, and it's up to the players.
Whatever the outcome, the captain assures the issue won't be a factor in the coming season, which he's sure to start from game one. Apart from a minor knee concern, Medeiros was given the thumbs up at a club medical yesterday, allowing him to enjoy some time off before returning to training later in January. Jim Callanan, NBN News. He finds it hard to avoid the golf course these days, but Nathan Green will take a break from a serious use of the sticks until at least Christmas. After a watershed year for him, Green returned to Australia with conditional playing rights on the rich US PGA Tour, before finishing third at the recent Australian PGA at Coolum. Leading into the final round, he was overrun by a rampant Robert Allenby, but says it's all part of the ongoing learning experience.
Change a few things this year as far as seeing a sports psychologist and stuff like that to try and get a bit more mentally prepared for the toughness of the tours over there.
He'll need every bit of steely nerve, given he'll be teeing it up against the likes of Tiger Woods and co on almost a weekly basis next year. Leaving soon into the new year, Green's first event is in Hawaii, but like all things, his future on tour rests in results.
Well, I've put a fair bit of work in to get where I am, and I'd hate to sort of go over there next year and sort of not play to what I know I can play like.
Finishing the best of the Hunter golfers on the Australian Order of Merit with almost $180,000, next best was Charlestown's James Nitties.
I think I just really like the experience, because imagine going overseas competing against another country and finding out what standard you are against, like America. Like, they're the best athletics country in the world.
It doesn't seem all that long ago that Clayton Zane was rising through the ranks every young player dreams of. A leading scorer in Norway, he'd been poached by Belgium's famous Anderlecht club and was building as a Socceroo regular. 3 years later, with as many knee operations, the 28-year-old's professional career is over.
Ultimately, your body tells you when your time's up, and in the end the decision wasn't as hard as what I would have thought.
A part of the failed 2002 World Cup qualifying squad, Zane was ecstatic Australia made it this time around for Germany, but unlike most, believes the Socceroos' draw is far from impossible.
My first reaction for the draw was no chance, but after having a look at all the groups, probably about 5 minutes later I said, like everyone's been saying, Japan and Croatia are definitely beatable.
The flow-on effect for the game locally is also something he's keen to measure, especially now he's moved into sports management, and he'll soon base himself in England.
We're just trying to make that step for players who do want to go overseas that little bit easier, because I've been there before, and it's it's not always an easy step to take.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The future is already taking shape at the Tea Gardens turn-off. However, Roads Minister Joe Tripodi has only just decided to tell locals they'll definitely be getting a new intersection with the upgraded Pacific Highway and not the nearby overpass they wanted to improve road safety.
We just cannot believe the decision made by Minister Tripodi.
An independent report recommends extended acceleration and deceleration lanes near the intersection. The Minister will tomorrow get a please explain in Parliament from the local member.
Certainly if we get a full Parliament, I'll certainly be moving some questions and motions as to why they've done this.
John Turner believes the progress of this work, coupled with RTA claims of a cost blowout from $6 million to $16.6 million for the overpass, are just proof the government is sticking to original plans to build the overpass in 2016.
What's going on is they don't want to build it, so they inflate the price. There's going to be deaths, and there are going to be people that will have to answer for those deaths.
And Joe Tripodi's claim the state doesn't have the money for the overpass has been rejected by Federal Roads Minister Jim Lloyd, who today told his state counterpart to think again.
So they've got the money, so money is not the issue. It's a matter of getting on with designing a safer and better intersection.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
While the Ensent got rigged up for tonight's game to be beamed to China, the Pirates and Tigers had their final shoot-around. Hunter will be without Larry Davidson for the match. The injury curse has again fallen on the forward. He'll undergo knee surgery next Tuesday and could be out for the rest of the season. Mike Helms is also hurting, with a mystery knee injury limiting him to very light training, but the star import is expected on court tonight.
Hopefully it's just tendonitis, but until I get time, really, to go get a scan, also, I really want to know what it is.
It was just last weekend that the Pirates came so close to upsetting Melbourne at home, and it's something Tigers coach Alan Westover hasn't forgotten.
I know they'll be feeling pretty confident about their chances, especially the way the game went the other night, so we're going to have to play a lot better than we did the other night to get a win here.
Without a weakness is how Pirates coach Adrian Hurley has described the Tigers, but he's focused on picking up the points at this crucial stage of the season.
I think we've got 5 games in 13 days, and against most of those against top teams. So it's very critical going into Christmas that we get some good wins under our belt.
Tip-off is at 7:40. Jessica Phillis, NBN News.
On the surface, they're simply moulded concrete spheres peppered with holes of different sizes. Underwater, they're palatial homes for fish. The Department of Primary Industries Fisheries Division is this week lowering 180 of the reef balls to the lake floor to form 6 separate structures.
They're a purpose-built artificial reef. They're there to create habitat. They've got lots of surface area. They can be moved if necessary, and they can actually be removed if the impacts were found to be, adverse to what we wanted to see in the lake.
The reefs are being established off Galgabba Point on the western side of Swansea, where the Concerned Anglers Group today became the Happy Anglers Group as they inspected the work.
But they work all over around the world they've been in, and they'll work in the lake. They'll attract fish, they'll make the fishing better. Easy spot for everyone to find. Can only go from better and better.
They're not only going to be great for recreational fishing, what we're hoping that they'll do, because they're replicating habitat that's already in the lake, is create nursery areas for juvenile fish as well. So what you'll see is hopefully an increase. With an increase in habitat, you may see an increase in the number of fish that are available and the number of juvenile fish that are settling into the lake as well.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Just a week old, little Ivy Hall is her mum's proudest achievement. one she'd never imagined possible.
I went and did like 6 pregnancy tests in one night. Made my husband drive to Woolies and buy 2 more different brands just to make sure.
Belinda Hall was told she'd probably never have children of her own after enduring chemotherapy as a 13-year-old to fight off a Ewing sarcoma, an aggressive form of bone cancer.
It was touch and go there for quite some time, 14 months of complete chemotherapy every 3 weeks.
I remember planning my funeral with my mum, telling her what I wanted, because we didn't know whether I'd make it or not.
She was given only a 40% chance of survival, but Belinda remained positive and active, seen here in her role as a champion for NBN's 1997 telethon for Children's Cancer Services. Now aged 23, she's beaten all the odds, both defying her disease and producing a precious new life.
We're just very grateful and very proud of our Belinda.
I used to lay in my bed and wonder where I'd be in 5-10 years. What sort of life will I have? Would I have a life? And now I have the best life. I have a beautiful husband who I adore and a beautiful baby.
And the joy of Ivy's first Christmas still to come.
Just what to do with the Newcastle line has polarised the debate on improvements to the region's public transport system. In what could be a breakthrough, the Hunter Business Chamber today revealed its plan for the $20 million Premier Morris Yemmer has earmarked for public transport infrastructure.
What we're saying is let's take that concentration away from there, talk about where the population is growing, and it's further west. It's not into the peninsula of Newcastle.
The plan involves Newcastle's electrification being withdrawn, taking around 100 trains per day out of the city. However, the electrification would be extended to Waratah and University stations, with both to become interchanges. The new Hunter Line train becomes the connection to the city, travelling the section between Hamilton and Newcastle at a speed of just 20 kilometres an hour.
If the government's committed, they could do this within 12 to 18 months, I believe. It's just a case of putting in some footings, building some gantries and running some power, doing a bit of signalling modification, systems up and running.
And that would be just the first stage of improvements for all public transport commuters.
Glendale, the John Hunter, the University, Charlestown, all of these areas are key to an integrated transport system. That's what we need.
Gary Blair, NBN News. Today was a typical day at the Eco Home. The Walker family planted a few veggies in the garden and fed the chooks as part of their eco-friendly lifestyle. Newcastle Council started the project in 1992, giving the occupants free rent in return for displaying environmentally friendly home technologies and practices. But since then, the solar hot water has broken down and $26,000 worth of repairs are needed to the house, prompting a council rethink.
In 1992, it was a cutting-edge activity to establish a home with environmentally progressive features, and fortunately Council did that.
He says the old house next to Harker Oval is no longer a showcase of the latest technologies and should be bulldozed. But the Walkers believe in the project.
I'd like to think this project is important for the community, enough for Council to support it into the future.
It's a fantastic project and it has a lot of scope to grow.
It seems to me that it would be a logical thing to do is return that back to parkland, and that in itself is a very environmentally sound thing to do.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
To be on 4 hours by the time I get to see him.
It's been surprising. I wasn't sure what the response was going to be, but it's been amazing everywhere.
It was peaceful as usual along Newcastle's sunny coastal strip today, but the fallout from this week's race riots in Sydney is still on people's minds, especially with text messages circulating about planned gatherings at local beaches this weekend. Police don't know if the messages are genuine or just mischievous, but they're not taking any chances.
We're taking it seriously. We're certainly rearranged some rostering and putting resources in place, and should anyone want to go down the misbehaving line or break the law, we'll certainly be acting on it very quickly.
A letter from the president of Nobby's Surf Club has urged all members to avoid the beach this Sunday because of a possible threat to safety. But Hunter Surf Lifesaving says all usual patrols and scheduled events will go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think it'll happen, mate. No, it'll be a non-event, I think.
I think there's a lot more people out there that are against it than for it.
We don't want a civil war, so we just want to everyone should just calm down and get back to business.
My experience with the Newcastle community is that it's a wonderful community, and more here, we're all here for each other, and I'm hoping that will prevail over the weekend.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Both experts in their field, Professor John and Dr Anne Duggan, hope to change the way we think about disease, focusing on the cause rather than the cure.
It makes so much more sense to prevent disease, and there's so much of gastrointestinal disease that is related to diet, exercise, the weight you are.
Over the past 2 years, they've combined their extensive knowledge to produce this textbook, The Epidemiology of Alimentary Diseases. It's a big name, but the aim is relatively simple, to provide clinicians with advice on how to help their patients.
People can do things to actually improve their disease without taking medications.
Common ailments like ulcer disease and reflux are linked to weight, diet and even smoking. And the pairs uncovered some interesting tips on how to have a healthy lifestyle.
Kids who eat lots of veggies 70 years later are much less likely to have died of cancer.
The text is a handbook for clinicians, but the Duggans are already planning another designed for the general public. The father-daughter partnership set for another test.
I suppose I can pull rank on her a bit, but we work remarkably well together.
Frank discussions at times.
Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
The Jets seem to have settled right into their new digs at Adamstown Oval, with the facilities winning the approval of coaching staff and players.
It's a lot better than when we last played here, I'll give it that. Ground staff look as though they've worked really hard on it. The surface is good.
While the focus is well and truly on the remainder of the season, next year's playing roster is also being considered. Richard Johnson is one of several players off contract in March, and negotiations regarding his future with the club have ground to a halt.
Basically, there's a few things they've got to work out, salary cap wise, and what other players they want to bring in. So at the moment it's at a standstill, nothing's been agreed and nothing's been disagreed really.
Although his heart lies in the Hunter, the former Watford midfielder cannot completely rule out returning to England if a deal with the Jets cannot be struck.
Moved my whole life here basically to the thinking that I would be staying. I've no plans to go back to the UK yet. As I said, I'd like to try and work things out here, but over the next few weeks we'll just have to see how that goes.
Jessica Phillis, NBN News.
Already the busiest emergency department in the state, John Hunter is preparing for its own version of the silly season.
We'll probably expect about a 10% increase on what we normally experience throughout the year.
Last summer, the region's hospital emergency departments treated 44,000 patients during December and January, up by 13% on the previous year. Hunter New England Health says it's well prepared for the seasonal spike.
We work on our elective surgery lists and make sure that we've got capacity within our operating theatres to manage any unplanned work coming through.
And as usual, emergency departments will operate 24/7 over the holiday period. Meanwhile, the health service says it's working with orthopaedic surgeons to sort through a serious shortfall in services at several major hospitals. Maitland is worst affected, the availability of after-hours anaesthetic for trauma patients at issue. Hunter New England Health says it's concerned and hopes to have a solution in the new year. Natasha Bayersdorf, NBN News.
Recovering at Merriweather Beach after receiving treatment from the physio earlier today, Mike Helms was understandably concerned about his injured knee.
Still pretty sore, I mean, I can walk and everything, so hopefully we'll find out what's the matter, and what's the extent of the injury tomorrow morning when I go to the doctor.
The night before, commentators had been singing his praises. Both Newcastle and Melbourne were strong from the outset, the home side narrowly in front after the first quarter. That lead was extended into double figures off the back of some excellent shooting outside the key from Brad Davidson, the pint-sized guard wrapping up 12 points in a matter of minutes. Melbourne stretched itself to make up the difference, and a surge saw them go into half-time 6 points ahead. The Pirates fought back in the third, but Melbourne showed why it was dubbed title favourites in a coaches' poll earlier in the week, soaring 15 points in front with just one quarter remaining. Pirates coach Adrian Hurley delivered the bad news to his team. But fatigue set in and Hunter was outclassed, going down by 19. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
The first Christmas teaches us about hospitality. The heavily pregnant Mary and the desperate Joseph receive hospitality from an innkeeper. Then, after the birth of the Christ child, they welcome complete strangers who come to adore him. Hospitality and Christmas seem to go together. May you experience wonderful hospitality this year as you celebrate Christmas. Australia desperately needs us to be hospitable and trusting.
At the moment, in the global scene and in our local scene, we're experiencing terrorism, racism, and the injustices that make people think that the world is a dark place. Christ came into our world to take away that darkness. Whatever is evil has been dispelled. The Diocese of Maitland, Newcastle and Bishop Michael Malone wish you a happy, holy and peaceful Christmas.
December is a time to expect calls from family and friends, but people need to be alert for unwanted incoming calls as well.
Our customers do need to be wary of a couple of phone scams that are out there right now.
The most recent scam to emerge has been through the reverse charges service. In just one example, a Telstra customer was charged $8.21 for a 17-second invalid reverse charges call. Telstra's advice is, if you're unsure about a call, hang up without pressing any numbers or buttons.
The operator should clearly identify which organisation they're from and who they're transferring the call to. If our customers aren't comfortable with that, they should hang up, and we urge them to do so.
The other scam targeting phone users at the moment is competition lines, and they've become a lot more common in the past 12 months. Telstra says its customers have been swamped by calls promising prizes including holidays and cars.
But if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. A lot of these scams are run by computers and using the phone lines as the medium to get to our customers.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.
In the Hunter, the rate of melanoma discoveries is up 10% in the last 5 years, with more than 500 new cases now reported each year. In one extreme case, this beachgoer passed out and had to be treated by ambulance officers for severe sunburn. Today's younger generation has been exposed to extensive sunsafe messages, but problems are now catching up with those who sunbathed 20 years ago.
Given that those in their 50s and 60s sunbathed before the slip, slop, slap message, we're seeing that lag in cases of melanoma and other skin cancers presenting.
A hot summer with extreme UV levels means covering up is vital.
We need to try and avoid the peak UV times in the middle of the day, as well as using protective clothing, a broad-brimmed hat and using a 30-plus sunscreen.
The Cancer Council says there are plenty of practical last-minute gift ideas at its retail stores, with profits going to cancer research and product development.
It takes just 11 minutes to receive a burning dose from the sun, so it does happen really quickly.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It was always going to take time to settle into life post her playing career, and months of renovating her beachside Merewether home more than helped Rachel McQuillan pass the time. A labour of love, it's helped her move on from her passion of playing pro tennis.
Oh, I tell you what, it's been tough. I've got itchy feet because, I'd only be home for 2 weeks and I'll be off again, and that was my whole life for like 15, 16 years professionally.
Already she's been chased by fellow former pro and one-time Caves Beach resident Jason Stoltenberg to coach for Tennis Australia. But playing with her new puppy Latte seems to be distraction enough these days.
At this stage of my life, I've just had a birthday, I'm 34 now. I just like to sort of do something for myself. I haven't had many times in my life where I've really smelt the roses and enjoyed my life, and now I am.
That's not to say she'll be lost to the game. Coaching does interest her. In fact, it could well be McQuillan's next business venture. Worried about the state of the game at junior levels, the move could come sooner rather than later.
We're struggling junior-wise in Australia. There's not many coming through. We need more, really, in junior development to sort of push the kids through a bit, and I'd like to get that going in Newcastle.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
It's the time for giving, and Wesley Newcastle City Mission is doing plenty of it. 460 food and toy hampers have already been distributed in the lead up to Christmas, and this week alone, around 45 people have been coming to the mission for assistance every day.
We see people who are homeless, we see people who are victims of domestic violence, people who are just really doing it tough at Christmas, unemployed people.
Mr Stephan says donations from the public have exceeded previous years, and he's attributing it to an increased awareness of giving, which began following last year's tsunami.
They're starting to probably look more to giving outside of their immediate world, and they're sort of looking at other areas where they can help.
And the volunteers were out in force at the Town Hall today, undertaking the mammoth task of preparing lunch for 500 people. Like last year, around 200 volunteers will serve a feast at the Newcastle foreshore for the Samaritans' Christmas lunch. Colleen West, NBN News.
G'day Australia, I'm Lieutenant James Keane, currently serving in Pakistan with the Australian Army. I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
I'd just like to say hello to everybody at home in Newcastle and in Townsville, wishing you a special Merry Christmas. A special hello to my family and also to my boyfriend Jared. I miss you guys and love you lots.
G'day everyone, it's Danny Kay here. I'm over in the Middle East getting the P3s off the ground. Just want to say a big hello to my parents, Jodie, Richard, my beautiful girlfriend Christy. I miss you a lot. Have a Merry Christmas and I'll see you next year. Have a beer for me.
Having not played since December 2nd, the Newcastle Jets have hardly enjoyed much time off. Besides a 5-day break, it's been work and plenty of it, and the coach couldn't be happier.
Yesterday we probably had the best training session that I've been involved in since I've been at the club. They looked really, really sharp.
By the time they play Central Coast next week, it will have been 4 weeks since their last game, and it's starting to drag on.
They can't wait for the next game, really, to be honest with you. You know, having lost against Adelaide, it still hurts a little bit, and you don't get rid of that feeling until you play again.
Captain Ned Zellich will celebrate Christmas with his family in Europe before returning next week, while others continue to show signs they may be back on the park, pushing for a start soon as well. Brett Studman, one of the long-term injured, now back on his feet. He still has some time to go, but hopes to feature in some of the club's next 6 games, with the top 2 finish the real goal.
We need to get something from Central Coast. We need not only for ourselves, but to keep them out of the picture.
After taking over from his bootmaker father, Bob Strang has been behind the counter of the family's Wallsend shop for almost half a century, a career he says he just fell into.
It's just because my father had it, and I think you always idolise your father and you try and follow in his footsteps.
Bob estimates he's repaired about 10,000 pairs of shoes in his lifetime, spending countless hours in his workshop, polishing, sewing and hammering, putting his heart and, pardon the pun, soul into the business. Among his many customers, members of Dean Perry's Tap Dogs, who utilised Bob's specialised skills making tap dancing shoes.
I'd just like to thank all the people for being so loyal, and we've always worked on repeat business, and I've never had to advertise.
After packing up his tools, the 61-year-old plans to swap his leather uppers for a leather golf bag.
I'm going to improve my golf handicap, which desperately needs improving, and we'll have a few holidays.
Have you got a good pair of golf shoes?
No, I play in joggers.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.
He tore through the Poms and contained the Windies, but Gary Gilmore has never had a victory like this. In a gruelling last 12 months, Gus spent 3 days a week in hospital having blood transfusions until he reached the top of the liver donor waiting list. He had the transplant 4 weeks ago, an operation with a high success rate. There was no complications.
90% success rate is pretty good, but you always think about that other bloody 10%.
After being discharged from Sydney's Royal Prince Alfred Hospital, Gary returned to Newcastle just in time for Christmas at home with wife Helen and the kids.
No matter how much faith you put in doctors and everything, you don't... I didn't know if I'd be home at all, sort of thing, so being home for Christmas is a bonus.
A talented all-rounder in the 70s, former teammates like Ian Chappell, Dennis Lilly and Kerry O'Keefe have rallied behind him this year, but it's the support of his family that he wants to repay first.
I owe them a lot, so we'll start Christmas Day.
It will be some time before he's 100% again, but the liver transplant and countless blood transfusions hasn't drained Gilmore's sense of humour.
Their blood will be in good supply in Newcastle again.
Because you're not taking it?
I'm not taking it again.
Todd Nardi, NBN News.